Tell me about your story kind of in 2013 when you finally got hooked and you also saw how Bitcoin could really work into stacks. You know, you were hanging, I think, in the East Village, strangely enough, with Ethereum co-founders and Chainlink founders. And what was going on there?
It was a very small world back then, right? And I'm pretty sure we would be saying the same thing 10 years from now when we're looking back at 2022, that, oh my God, it was such a small world back then. But obviously this is an order of magnitude of a difference here. So Bitcoin, was trading under $100 at that time. It kept coming up in some of the conversations around people around me. And I was like, I'm a computer scientist. I did a PhD in distributed systems. I was actually still enrolled at Princeton, but really trying to get into startups. I've decided that academia is not for me. And at that time, like, I wasn't that interested in the monetary aspects of Bitcoin, right? But I was interested in the peer-to-peer system, and basically the internal workings of how this protocol is working. Like, that was fascinating to me, and I was basically trying to poke around that. And interestingly, it just so happened, like, I was living in East Village, and the apartment on top of me, I knew the neighbors, and they rented out on Airbnb their apartment for some months to one of the Ethereum co-founders. Right. And
Which
Ethereum
one?
co-founder is basically, he likes to be more private. He's
Okay.
one of the six people, but he was basically telling me about why Ethereum and fully expressive smart contracts are really important. And I, coming more from academia, was very scared of fully expressive smart contracts. I'm like, this is like, running untrusted code on other people's computers, right? Like, a lot of horrible things can happen if you do that, right? I was actually very resistant to the idea. And this is one of the lessons that I've learned over the years, that I think the power of fully expressive smart contracts is much, much stronger than any potential downsides, right? And then the work that we did was actually trying to limit the potential downsides by inventing this programming language called Clarity, where it is very expressive. You can pretty much build anything you can build with Solidity or a fully expressive smart contract, but it limits the potential downsides, right? So I wouldn't get too much into that. But interestingly, there was a small co-working space where we used to work from, and the Chainlink founder, Sergey, was working out of there, right? So like what's the probability of, like, three kind of like big projects in crypto pretty much on the same 2 block radius, right? And working together. And then when Bitcoin, I think I would buy Bitcoin when it was below 100. Every time it would cross 100, I'll feel like it's too expensive. I'm not going to buy. And at some point, I think there was a Bitcoin crash. It went to like 200, and then it dropped. And there was a trading and mining community forming in New York at that time as well. And when Bitcoin dropped, if you go back and look at the charts, there was a floor of 72, right? It never came down 72 and never again saw those levels. We actually knew the party who had the buy order at 72, right? They wanted to buy a ton of Bitcoin and just did the calculation that this is the right number where they would basically buy. So it was like such a small world that Bitcoin is crashing, and the bottom call, that's the number at 72, we actually knew who is doing that, right? Like, and it was a fascinating world. There's no way you can do that in Bitcoin today, right? Like, it is such a decentralized, organic, international market that there's so many players. I don't think now you could be able to basically know through word of mouth that, like, what's going on in the market.
Yeah, I actually bought some Bitcoin at 85 pounds in 2013, around the same time, because Max Kaiser came on my show back in 2013. He was screaming about Bitcoin and Bernanke, but also Max is incredibly smart, and we were both lamenting the fact that there was no market makers in Bitcoin, and so it was just this order-driven system, and I was frustrated by the lack of liquidity. I was used to trading U.S. bond markets where there's a lot of liquidity in the 30-year bond and foreign exchange, and then going into Bitcoin. And it's funny to watch that video back now and to see, how much things have evolved, in just the centralized exchange space. But I remember those times. I remember it was still quite cliquey. It was still scammy. It was still Silk Roady, and for many years, like you said, a real pioneer if you're around in that space, especially developing code. And so initially, you weren't convinced that that smart contract, which again is basically a small computer program based on the code. It's not a smart or a contract, some people have told me, right? But I had Professor Silvio Macaulay on here, who I know you've done some work with as well. And it's great to see computer scientists looking at this, because sometimes you bring a different angle to it because you understand coding kind of in your DNA. When did you then see that this was going to be part of your life's work with Stacks?
Yeah. So I think in the early days, like it was a little bit like, we didn't have any funding. We were just like hacking on these things for the fun of it, right? And we were fascinated by the technology, and I was always interested in what can you do with this technology, right? Other than the monetary aspect, like Bitcoin, yes, the hard cap. I understand. I think I realize the importance of sound money more now after spending so many years in the Bitcoin community. There are some people who are in it only for the sound money, right? Like Max is probably like one of those people. Like they're like, I don't care about any other use cases, right? Like I'm here only for the sound money and only for Bitcoin. I think I realized the importance of that a lot more now, but I've always been more interested in like, what else can you do with the technology? Because that is, to me, it's just much more fascinating, because I see that as fundamental new infrastructure, and people can basically build all sorts of new things on top, right? So we were really interested in what can you build on top, and the best way to do that is actually trying out building things yourself, right? So we tried building some really initial blockchain applications on top of Bitcoin. The first system, it was called One Name. It lived for like around 3 years between 2014 to 2016. And it was really like the first username based, profile page built on a blockchain, right? So think of that as like an early version of like, your Facebook page or Twitter profile, but it's built directly on a blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain. And then that helped us like discover some of the underlying scalability challenges or the lack of programmability. I think it became very clear to us by actually trying to build applications that the fully expressive smart contract approach that Ethereum had was way superior, right? And I think that has now been accepted in the industry. Like every other blockchain project that has really launched, be it Solana, Avalanche, Algorand, others, almost everyone has expressive smart contracts in there. And so I would say 2017 is the year when a bunch of different L1 protocols basically started getting funding. So 2017 and 2018 are the 2 years. Cosmos got funded there, Filecoin. So we were a couple of months after Filecoin. So the Stacks project basically got their funding in 2017. And then typically, building a high quality layer one blockchain basically takes you at least 2 to 3 years.